Get your tent off that land before I call the cops. That's the first thing I heard, not hello, not good evening, not even is everything okay? Just a shrill, angry voice slicing through the quiet calm of my ranch lake like a blade. I had just set up my tent. It was late afternoon, the sun was slipping low, and I was finally taking a weekend off, just me, the lake, some grilled food, and a quiet night under the stars. Or so I thought. The woman stomping down the hill in yoga pants and an HOA badge on her neck had other plans. I live in that neighborhood just past the tree line, she snapped, waving a smartphone like it was a badge of authority. And we don't allow unauthorized camping on HOA recreational property. I stared at her, confused for a moment. HOA property? I asked slowly, "Lady, this is my ranch. That lake you're pointing at? That's mine. This whole side of the valley is mine." She blinked, stopped, then smirked. "That's rich. Everyone knows this lake belongs to the Stonebrook Homeowners Association. I've lived here 8 years. We've had BBQs, bonfires, and fishing tournaments here every summer." That's when something snapped. I knew every inch of my land. My grandfather bought this 87-acre ranch before I was even born. I'd spent every summer fishing this exact lake with him, hauling catfish off the dock before I could spell my own name. But I never realized Stonebrook, a subdivision built about 10 years ago on the far end of the property line, had crept so far over. And now, this HOA was claiming my lake as theirs? "Call the cops," I said flatly, staring at her. "Let's see what happens." That's when it all exploded. 30 minutes later, I was sitting by my fire pit, flipping a burger on my skillet, when 2 sheriff's cruisers rolled up on the dirt trail. Their tires kicked up a cloud of dust that blanketed the hillside. The HOA woman, I later found out her name was Cheryl, ran up to them like she was a celebrity on the red carpet. "There, that's him," she cried. "He's illegally squatting by the lake. He threatened me. I demand you remove him. This is HOA-protected land." The 2 deputies walked up, looking wary. I stood up, hands at my sides, calm as the water. "Sir," one of them said, "we got a call about a trespasser. Do you have identification?" "I do," I replied. "But before I hand it over, you might want to check this first." I reached into my canvas folder and pulled out a copy of the survey map and deed, 2 papers I always kept on me when I was on the land. It wasn't paranoia. It was just what my grandfather always taught me. When you own land, you defend it with your voice and your paperwork. The deputy unfolded the map, eyes scanning. The second, one looked over my shoulder. Silence. "You're saying this is your property?" the first one asked. "Not saying. Proving. That dock." I pointed. "I built it with my dad when I was 12. That shed? Mine. And that trail y'all drove up? My great-granddad cut it through here with a chainsaw and a mule." They stared at Cheryl. "Well, that's impossible," she spat. "We've always used that lake. It's listed in our HOA brochures. Our kids swim there every 4th of July. We even cleaned it up last spring." I almost laughed. "You cleaned my lake? You've been trespassing on this land for years and didn't even know it." And that's when the cop's demeanor changed. Fast. "Ma'am," the deputy said carefully, "you may have accidentally been using private property without permission. We're going to need to look into this." But I already knew I would. Thoroughly. That night, I didn't just camp, I stayed up making notes. First, I logged every structure, trail, and fence line. Second, I took time-stamped photos of every HOA item on my land, benches, signs, even a faded HOA bulletin board nailed to a tree near the lake. And third, I called up my friend Jenna. She's a real estate attorney and a pit bull in heels. "You're telling me they've been using your lake for how long?" she asked the next morning. 10 years, give or take. "And they just called the cops on you for being on your own property?" I could hear the smirk. "Oh, we're going to have fun with this." Fun turned into a legal wildfire. Within 72 hours, Jenna filed a formal cease and desist letter with the HOA board. We sent it certified. I got the receipt and the signature. In it, we demanded, immediate removal of all HOA signage and furniture from my property, an official written apology, back payment for unauthorized use of private land for HOA events, including a calculated rental fee for every year of use, a complete halt to all foot traffic, fishing, swimming, or use of a lake. It was like lighting dynamite in a wasp's nest. By that Friday, I had a parade of very uncomfortable HOA board members knocking at my ranch gate. One of them, a guy named Tom, apparently the HOA president, looked genuinely shocked. We thought this area was part of the common zone. That's what the developer told us. We've had community events here for years. I pulled out the maps again. This is my deed. This is your neighborhood boundary. See this little creek? That's your edge. You've been over it for a decade. Tom rubbed his temples. Look, maybe we can come to an agreement. Lease the lake shared access. Not anymore, I said. You called the cops on me. That bridge is burned. And then I found something worse. I started digging through old HOA flyers, brochures, and Facebook group posts. Turns out, they hadn't just been hosting events. The HOA had been charging residents an annual lake use fee for my lake. They'd made thousands of dollars off it year after year, under the claim it was Stonebrook Scenic Commons. I couldn't believe it. They weren't just trespassing. They were profiting from it. That was the last straw. Jenna filed a civil suit. Trespassing. Unauthorized commercial use of private land. Fraudulent claims of ownership. She even found out their developer had misrepresented the property lines in their initial sales brochures, which meant we now had a potential class action from homeowners too, once they learned the truth. I didn't just want an apology anymore. I wanted justice. And I wanted the truth public. By Sunday morning, I was up before sunrise. I'd spent the night by the fire, thinking, planning, and more importantly, watching. I knew the HOA would come snooping. And sure enough, just after 6 a.m., I heard the familiar bzzz overhead. A drone. Not a cheap one either. This had range, a camera, and someone on the other end watching my every move. It hovered over the lake, dipped low, then zipped back toward the Stonebrook subdivision. I wasn't dumb. They were trying to see if I'd left, maybe hoping I'd be scared off by the cops or legal talk. Too bad for them, I had my own drone too. I launched it an hour later, followed their drone's return path, and recorded everything. Their dock, their clubhouse lawn, a woman sunbathing on my shoreline like it was hers. The HOA had built an actual picnic area on the far bank, on my land. No wonder Cheryl thought she had the right to throw me off my own lake. These people had been playing house on my ranch for a decade. That Thursday, Jenna and I walked into the monthly Stonebrook HOA board meeting. They didn't want us there, but since part of it involved legal matters and affected adjacent landowners, i.e. we had a right to attend. The second I walked in, whispers started, "That's the guy with the lake." He called lawyers. I heard he wants to sue the HOA. Tom, the HOA president, cleared his throat nervously. As you all know, he began, "We're currently in a bit of a property dispute with our adjacent landowner," Jenna interrupted. "It's not a dispute. You're using land you don't own, charging money for access, and enforcing rules on property that legally belongs to my client. That's called trespassing and commercial fraud." You could hear a pin drop. A woman stood up in the crowd, Mrs. Hawkins, if I recall. "Wait. Are you saying we've paid fees to use land the HOA doesn't even own?" Jenna nodded. Every dollar you paid toward the lake use fee was for something the HOA had no right to offer you. Chaos broke loose. People yelling, demanding refunds, asking for audits. One guy in the back started filming the meeting on his phone. I just stood there, arms crossed, watching the whole thing crumble. 3 nights later, I was back on the ranch, cleaning up some branches by the shed when I heard footsteps crunching behind me. I turned fast, flashlight in hand, just in time to catch a shadow ducking behind the storage shed. "Who's there?" I barked. Silence. I crept forward, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. That's when I saw him, hoodie pulled low, holding a can of spray paint. He'd already tagged the side of the shed with "thief" in red letters. "Drop it and walk," I said, stepping forward with my phone out. "I've got your face on camera. This is private land." The kid looked maybe 17, scared stiff. I I thought this was HOA property, he mumbled. Cheryl said you were trying to steal the lake. I stared. Cheryl, of course. I let the kid go, but I made sure the footage ended up with the sheriff and with Jenna. This wasn't just about some squabble over land anymore. They were lying to residents, stirring up trouble. And now, teens were sneaking onto my land, thinking I was the villain. That's when I made my next move. I installed game cameras. Dozens of them. Within 2 days, I had footage of HOA members parking their golf carts by my dock, teens fishing in my cove, a Cheryl herself walking up with a clipboard and telling a family where to set up their picnic, and then the kicker, footage from 4 a.m. showing someone dragging a cement bench onto my shoreline. They were still trying to claim the land. I edited a full video, clean, time-stamped, GPS tagged, and sent it directly to Jenna, the sheriff's office, and the county assessor. Then I uploaded a private YouTube link and sent it anonymously to the Stonebrook HOA Facebook group. It took less than 2 hours before every comment section exploded. Wait, they lied to us? I paid HOA fees for 10 years for that lake. So we've been criminals this whole time? Cheryl posted a weak apology. Tom tried to delete the video. Too late. Screenshots and re-uploads were spreading like wildfire. The county assessor called Jenna back the same day. She submitted the drone footage and camera evidence. Apparently, they'd had suspicions for years. Ma'am, the voice on speaker crackled. We've had multiple lakefront ownership filings from that HOA. Their surveys have always looked off. Turns out, the HOA had submitted hand-drawn diagrams over the years, redrawing the neighborhood boundaries to include parts of my land. No official surveyor seal. No updated GPS plots. Just crayon-level audacity and zero legal standing. Jenna pressed harder. Did you ever approve their lake use filings? No, the man replied. We actually rejected one 5 years ago. They were warned. Repeatedly. I leaned forward, stunned. So they knew. They knew, the voice said, and kept charging residents access fees anyway. Boom. That was fraud. Plain and simple. Jenna smiled. Get everything you have. We're going to make this very public, very fast. Jenna dug deeper. Public records, building permits, old HOA newsletters from residents who were now mad enough to cooperate. And what she found? A full permit scheme. The HOA had fabricated lake improvement permits, charging residents $75 per month for shore maintenance, dock repair, and water access security. But there was no dock repair, no official maintenance logs. And when Jenna matched the coordinates from their newsletters to actual GIS maps, they were improving property they didn't own, mine. Even crazier, one of the security expenses they billed residents for was the cost of calling sheriff. On me. They were literally billing the neighborhood to fund harassment against the actual landowner. I didn't know whether to laugh or throw something. Let's hit them where it hurts, Jenna said. How? We'll file a trespass and restitution complaint with both the sheriff and small claims court. But I also want to go bigger. Let's expose the fraud at the HOA board meeting. Publicly, I nodded. Time to bring everything into the light. We scheduled a land ownership town hall at the community center. I wasn't sure who would show up. Most had only seen me through Facebook threads and HOA gossip. But the place was packed. Jenna started with a slideshow. County maps with official plot lines, drone footage, HOA, fee receipts, the denied, permit copies, then she dropped the bomb. For over a decade, you've been misled by your HOA. You've paid fees for land they don't own. They've lied to the county. They've endangered you legally by encouraging trespass. People gasped. A man near the front turned red. I want every penny back. Mrs. Hawkins from earlier stood and faced the board members directly. How dare you shame this man when you've been stealing from us? Cheryl tried to speak, but every word she said only made things worse. When Jenna brought up the fake survey diagrams, even the board treasurer stood up and walked out. That's when I realized I wasn't alone anymore. The residents weren't my enemies. They were victims too, and they wanted blood. 2 days later, the sheriff called me. Hey, he said, just wanted you to know, we're officially opening an investigation into Stonebrook HOA. The county DA's looped in. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd filed a complaint. After the town hall, 8 residents filed fraud reports. The sheriff's office had subpoenaed the HOA's financials and requested meeting transcripts. But that wasn't even the best part. "You're not going to believe this," the deputy said with a chuckle. "Their so-called HOA security cameras? Half of them were pointed at your lake, and they stored their footage on a cloud account linked to Cheryl's personal email. Boom. Surveillance without consent. More legal fuel. And then came the kicker. One of our investigators found a past cease and desist letter from the original land surveyor addressed to Stonebrook HOA, dated 11 years ago. It warned them not to use the lake for community events. So they'd known all along. This wasn't ignorance. It was willful trespass, fraud, and abuse of power. And Cheryl? She was going down. 3 days after the town hall, I received an unmarked manila envelope in my mailbox. No name, no return address. Inside were photocopies of HOA emails, a memo from Cheryl telling board members to keep quiet about the lake ownership, a document titled Emergency Strategy, Frame the Ranch Owner as a Violent Intruder. I froze. They were planning to frame me. The same day I camped at the lake, they tried to set me up as an armed threat. That's why they called the cops and exaggerated everything. But here's the twist. The documents were sent anonymously. Whoever sent them was on the inside. Someone on that board had turned. Maybe they were scared, or just done being complicit. Either way, they gave me dynamite. Jenna's eyes lit up when she saw the papers. This isn't just a civil case now. This is conspiracy and malicious prosecution. We're going to court. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the underdog anymore. I felt like the storm. The next evening, I got a message from a burner account on Facebook. "Meet me behind the post office at 9 p.m. I'll be near the dumpsters. Don't bring anyone." Jenna said I shouldn't go, but curiosity got the better of me. I pulled up, parked in the shadows, and waited. A man in khakis and a blue windbreaker stepped out, glancing around nervously. I recognized him, Alan, one of the HOA board members. Always quiet, never voted against Cheryl, but never made waves either. "I can't take it anymore," he whispered. "I didn't sign up for this. I thought it was just neighborhood stuff, not scheming, not framing people." He handed me a flash drive. Meeting recordings, he said, "Private sessions. Cheryl said if we didn't back her lies, we'd be removed from the board. She told us you were dangerous. Violent." My hands shook as I took it. Alan looked at me with guilt in his eyes. "Whatever happens next, I hope you make it right." Then he disappeared into the night. The flash drive had 6 audio files. They were all time-stamped and dated, some as far back as 2 years. Cheryl's voice was clear as day. "The ranch guy doesn't even live full-time. If we pressure him, he'll back off. Let's get the sheriff out there. Say he threatened someone. It doesn't have to stick, it just needs to scare him. If he sues, we'll stall. Most people can't afford the fight." Jenna listened in stunned silence. This is gold," she whispered. "It wasn't just HOA, overreach. This was deliberate, recorded strategy to intimidate and defraud. We compiled everything audio, video, financials, maps, emails into one massive evidence folder. Then we scheduled a meeting with the district attorney. And this time we brought media. The DA's office was already in motion by the time we arrived. Apparently, the anonymous leaks and resident complaints had made waves. But what really lit the fire? The local news station got hold of the story. Ranch owner accused of trespassing, but he owns the land HOA's been using for years. Within 24 hours, reporters were camped outside the Stonebrook community gates. Cheryl was seen storming out of the HOA office. Residents were demanding a forensic audit. The HOA posted a Facebook announcement. Due to unforeseen complications, HOA board activities are temporarily suspended pending legal review. Translation? They were panicking, but I wasn't done yet. Not even close. 2 days before the first court hearing, Cheryl's lawyer sent me a letter. A cease and desist. Our client demands you remove all drones, cameras, and public accusations regarding lake property pending resolution. Jenna almost laughed reading it. They're accusing you of invasion of privacy while they've been squatting on your land for a decade. She sent back a fiery response, citing property law, consent rules, GPS evidence, and the fact that our footage was gathered from my side of the lake. Then we filed a countermotion, request for injunctive relief, and public apology. And it worked. The judge granted a temporary restraining order preventing the HOA from using the lake area at all until the trial. Cheryl's grip was slipping fast, and just when I thought things couldn't get worse for her, the local historical society of all people reached out. Turns out, my grandfather had donated parts of the ranch to the county for conservation decades ago, but had kept the lake and surrounding acreage in a protected trust. They handed over a deed from 1964. It clearly stated, "The water body and 50 yards from every shore point shall remain private property, undivided and non-commercialized without written consent from the family estate," meaning even if the HOA had bought the entire neighborhood, they'd still have no right to the lake. The whole time, the deed had been sitting in a county archive box, ignored. I called Jenna. "We've got their coffin nail." She grinned. "Then let's hammer it in publicly." The first court date was set. Small town courthouse. Packed benches. Reporters in the back. Angry residents in the front. And Cheryl, dressed in beige like she was headed to a charity brunch, still acting like she owned the place. Jenna laid out our case methodically. Satellite maps. The 1964 deed. HOA fee receipts tied to fraudulent lake use. Audio recordings of the HOA board planning to frame me. And finally, Alan's sworn affidavit. Cheryl's attorney objected. The judge shut it down quickly. "This is about trespass, misrepresentation, and abuse of civil authority," the judge said. "You'd better start explaining yourselves." Cheryl took the stand. Calm at first, but Jenna was surgical. "Did you or did you not tell your board members that my client was a trespasser on land he legally owns?" "I may have been misinformed," Cheryl said. "Misled by whom?" "The same people you were leading." She squirmed. And that was before Jenna played the recording, the one where Cheryl said, "He's a nobody. We just need to get law enforcement on our side long enough to scare him off." The courtroom went silent. Then murmurs. Then gasps. This was no longer a zoning dispute. This was a conspiracy exposed live. Cheryl tried to save face. But after the recording, the residents who had once applauded her at meetings were now staring like they didn't recognize her at all. One by one, they stood and made statements. "I paid over $3,000 in fees over 5 years for lake access. I want it back. My husband and I built a dock on what we now know was someone else's land. We could have been sued." Cheryl told us to lie to the sheriff if the rancher ever got aggressive. I never signed up for that. It was a total collapse. Even board members who had stayed silent until now began pointing fingers. She threatened us with removal if we didn't follow her narrative. She said the ranch guy wasn't important, that we could outspend him. The judge scribbled notes furiously. Jenna turned and whispered to me, "They're eating their own now. This is only the beginning." I looked toward Cheryl. She wasn't angry anymore. She looked scared. By the time we left the courthouse, the parking lot was swarmed. 3 local channels, 1 regional network, and a news blogger were all set up with microphones and cameras. I wasn't used to attention. But Jenna? She was made for this. She gave the statement while I stood behind her. The public deserves to know how a private citizen was harassed, slandered, and targeted by people who knowingly trespassed on his land. This isn't just a civil issue. This is about abuse of community power. They played clips from the court. They showed the 1964 deed. They even aired part of Cheryl's now infamous recording. The headline that evening, HOA president caught lying about land ownership, rancher fights back and wins in court. The view count skyrocketed, and so did messages from other people across the state. My HOA is doing something similar. Can I contact your attorney? This story needs to go national. I wasn't just a rancher anymore. I had become a symbol of every homeowner sick of overreach and manipulation. But Cheryl wasn't finished yet. She had one final trick up her sleeve. A week later, Cheryl filed a counterclaim. She blamed the surveyors. She claimed the county maps were unclear. She even tried to sue her own HOA board members for negligent advice. The desperation was real, but Jenna dismantled the filing in 2 pages. She attached the recordings, the historical deed, the email from Cheryl requesting the maps be doctored to align with community goals. The court laughed it out of the room. Then the HOA insurance carrier called. They were dropping coverage for Stonebrook, citing gross misconduct and legal fraud. Without insurance, the HOA couldn't pay legal fees, couldn't pay Cheryl's defense, couldn't pay refunds. The whole structure began to collapse. Some residents held emergency meetings, asking if they could dissolve the HOA altogether. Others wanted Cheryl personally liable. And I just kept showing up calm, quiet, knowing the truth had done all the heavy lifting. One morning, I took my coffee and walked back down to the lake. For the first time in months, there was peace. No HOA patrols. No angry residents. Just wind in the trees and the quiet lap of water. I set up my old canvas tent exactly where I had that first night. Same spot. Same fire pit. No fear this time. Jenna walked down a few minutes later with 2 folding chairs and a file folder. She handed me a new map. This is the final boundary document. County approved. HOA free. I looked at the fresh seal on the paper. Every inch of the lake, dock, and surrounding 50 yards was marked as mine. We toasted with camp mugs. I wasn't just a landowner anymore. I was the one who had faced down a crooked board, stood my ground, and exposed them for what they were. And best of all, the sheriff himself had called earlier to say he'd cleared my name and was recommending charges against Cheryl and 2 other board members. The trespassers were done, but the story still wasn't over, because now the lake wasn't just a private retreat. It was about to become something much, much bigger. The courtroom was packed again. This time, Cheryl wasn't sitting at the plaintiff's table. She stood beside her defense attorney, pale, shaking, trying to keep her voice steady. The district attorney had charged her with filing a false police report, intentional misrepresentation, civil harassment, abuse of position in a public trust role. She pled no contest to avoid jail, but the damage was done. The judge ordered her to pay restitution to over 30 residents, cover legal costs for the HOA, publicly issue a written apology to me, posted on every HOA bulletin board and digital forum. For 90 days, the apology was cold, formulaic, but the message was clear. Cheryl was finished, and her face, once on every HOA newsletter, was now the face of what happens when power is abused. Weeks later, I was invited, shockingly, to a town hall meeting inside the very community that had once treated me like a criminal. No sheriff, no arguments, just 40 homeowners sitting in folding chairs, looking tired but ready to move on. "We don't trust the board anymore," one woman said. "We just want to live in peace." "We're not renewing our HOA contracts," said another. "We'll maintain our properties as neighbors, not as enforcers." The vote was nearly unanimous. Stonebrook HOA would begin formal dissolution. The community that once sent the cops to my tent was now dismantling the very system that had turned neighbor against neighbor. And somehow they looked relieved. 2 weeks later, I received a certified letter. It was from a local conservation nonprofit, the same group that had preserved parts of my grandfather's ranch. They wanted to lease access rights to the lake, not for commercial use, not for profit, but for seasonal educational retreats focused on land conservation, native species restoration, and youth camping. They offered generous compensation, full legal protections, and complete respect for my property. I thought about all the ways this land had been misused. Then I thought about giving back the right way. I signed, and that summer, the lake echoed with kids laughing, learning to fish, building fires, and respecting the land that had almost been stolen. The lake that had once drawn HOA greed now became a symbol of resilience and rebirth. A small wooden sign was posted by the trail leading in. This land once faced false claims and unjust control. It now stands free for growth, peace, and truth. People from nearby towns would visit. Former HOA members would sometimes walk by, quiet, respectful, even offering thanks. One day, Alan, the former board member who'd given me the recordings, came by. I didn't have the guts to fight her, he said, but I'm glad you did. I told him, you gave me the spark I needed. That counts. He smiled, nodded, and walked off with his hands in his pockets. Sometimes, peace doesn't come from winning a war. It comes from protecting something long enough to outlive the fight. That fall, I set up camp by the lake again. No court dates, no patrols, no calls to the sheriff. Just me, the fire, and the stars reflected in still water. I thought about my grandfather, about how he fought to keep this land free, about how it nearly slipped away because of a fake HOA title and a desperate president clinging to control. And I thought about how close I came to giving up. But I didn't. I stayed. I stood my ground. And the land, the truth, stood with me. So, if you're ever caught in a fight like this, when they try to push you off your own ground, remember this: they can't take what they never owned. Thanks for watching. If you found this story powerful, hit that like button, drop a comment, and make sure to subscribe for more real, dramatic underdog stories just like this one. Your support helps us keep these stories alive and spreading.